This is the Whole Care Network, helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Hello, everybody. Today I have you a very special surprise. Here with me is Marianne Shuko, and I hope I got her name correct. She is a founder of All's Authors. She's a nurse. She is a podcaster, and she's a caregiver rock star. So welcome, Marianne.
Hi, Isabel. Thanks so much for inviting me to be on your show.
Thank you so much for being here with us. As you know, here we talk a lot about caregiving, and we talk a lot about self-care. And I know you have your own journey. So what can you tell us about this journey and how you prioritize your self-care? I think people would love to know from you how you prioritized your self-care.
My caregiving journey was with my parents and my stepfather. He was married to my mother for 30 years. He had dementia. And my mother, she had a number of physical ailments, not dementia. My mother was in her late 80s and he was in his late 70s. They had a 9-year age gap between them. And my relationship with him was always kind of tempestuous. We didn't get along. Sometimes we got along great, but it was always up in the air. I never knew what to expect from him. So when they started to experience difficulties, I was very close to my mom, although I lived 250 miles away. So I was a long distance caregiver and the only daughter. And my stepfather had no children. And I had 3 brothers who lived near my mom. I was the one that she depended on and trusted. So when they started to have decline, she asked me for her help with him because he was becoming unmanageable. And we didn't really know why. He had always had cognitive impairments since birth. He was a premature baby born 1936 who survived, but they really didn't have resources at that time for children like that. So he actually was very successful in his life considering his limitations. He started exhibiting very odd behaviors, and I'll just talk about a few of them. One thing that he did was he would sleep about 20 hours a day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I would go to visit. I used to show up like on, trying to think when I would go, like Sunday, early in the afternoon, he'd be sleeping. And he would wake up only to eat. And then he'd go back in his recliner and sleep again and sometimes watch TV. He would be up in the middle of the night. We would hear him watching television and snacking and eating things he wasn't supposed to have because he had diabetes. But we would spend the whole day together and do whatever we wanted to do with him just in the recliner, sleeping the whole time. So that was kind of a problem. And then if he was awake, he would just perseverate on the same topics endlessly, saying the same things over and over and over again, and they weren't things that made sense. And then he also had a tendency to upset other people by saying things that were very rude and hurtful. Like he knew what everybody's Achilles heel was, and so he would hammer on it, and people would get upset. So those were some of the signs that we saw. He was very unkempt. He did not want to bathe, shave, change his clothes. He managed to find the rattiest clothes he had. He would wear those. And this was a man, he had beautiful things. He was raised in a well-to-do family that had privilege and had resources. So he knew quality, and he had a lot of quality things. And he always groomed himself every day. He would, kept his hair neat, shaved, showered, wore something nice, had cologne, had jewelry, had all of that stuff. And he just forget about that. So my mom asked me to help. And when we first started out, I said, well, we need to get a new doctor because their doctor was not helpful. This is an issue that a lot of people experience. He was happy to just let them continue on in their way because it was in a lot of trouble. But when we tried to explain to him that we were having difficulties with Fred cognitively, he was not really capable or willing to help us. So that's why I said, first thing we need to do is get a new doctor because we're not getting anywhere with this person. And so they agreed, and he wanted a woman doctor. So I found one. And so the very first visit, she said, he has dementia. He needs to go to memory care.
Oh, wow.
I thought maybe he was depressed. I never really thought about dementia, even though I'm a nurse and I worked in dementia for most of my career. And I counseled families and worked with families and worked in long-term care. I was kind of like, what? Wasn't expecting that. I thought maybe he was depressed. Maybe we'd give him an antidepressant and he would come back. It's just, I think that when it's your person, then you put up blinders. You can't really see the whole picture because you don't want a bad outcome. So then they wanted to do the whole workup. Well, then the whole thing about the memory care also blew my mind because that was something that's like kind of comes at the end. And we were just starting on this journey. And now you're telling me he really can't stay at home with my mom, which was becoming apparent. But anyway, I said, well, we're going to do the workup. We're going to see what's going on. And we had all that scheduled. And then my mom calls me and says, we don't want to go to the doctor anymore. We're just, we're fine. And he's fine. And we want to cancel all the appointments. And had said to her at the outset, I said, if we're going to do this, we're not going to stop. We're going to see it out. I'm not going to start this and then have you stop it, because if that's what you're planning to do, I'm not even going to start. We'll just leave it alone. But she had agreed. So finally I convinced her and I just said, the doctor thinks he has dementia, but we don't know that for sure. So why don't we owe it to him to find out what's going on. We don't have enough information. So why don't we do these things, get these tests and see these doctors and see what they say. And maybe she's wrong. We don't know. So she bought that. And then we ended up doing the workup. One of the worst things I ever had to do in my life was accompany him to his testing with the neurologist and the psychiatrist. And when he went for his MRI, and see him fail miserably with the tests that they do, the mini mental status test, asking him to, simple questions like, do you know what day it is? And he was very canny because what he said was, why do I need to know what day it is? I don't work, because he was retired. And I said, that's a good answer. He didn't know the day. He didn't know where he was. He didn't know how he got there. He knew who I was. And remember, he didn't really like me and I was making him do these things. It was the same thing with the psychiatrist. And he was very belligerent there. And when the psychiatrist would ask him a question, he'd throw it back at the psychiatrist. It was kind of strange. He thought he was trying to be smart and funny, but he was not. It was very pitiful. And I remember driving home with him and I had to lock all the doors in the car because I was afraid he was going to jump out because he didn't want to be with me and he didn't want to go where we were going. He was very quiet though. He didn't really say anything. I tried to engage him in a conversation. And he was telling me how that summer, because this was like in March or April, and how he was planning to go to their summer place and all that. And I was thinking to myself, he's not going anywhere. It was really sad. They're not going. So and all I could think about was, how am I going to tell my mother? Because she didn't come with us, because my mom, in the meantime, had been in an automobile accident with a friend of hers and was hurt very badly. She had several broken bones. And that was really the catalyst for all of this regarding him, because she was caring for him and he was not able to participate in any care for her when she needed it. Now, she was physically disabled and he was mentally disabled. So it was not a good combination. So that's why she didn't come along on these visits, which was a good thing, because she tended to try to take over the visit and answer for him and minimize the situation. And that's what she had been doing for years, to try to keep things the status quo, because I think that most people, and in this kind of a situation, whether it's a dementia situation or any serious illness, it requires great change. And people resist change. People don't really like to change things. So when you see somebody is changing due to an illness, whether it's a mental illness or a physical illness, it's really scary. And people don't want to acknowledge it. They want to keep things kind of the status quo. There was a lot riding on it for her financially, losing her partner. They live together. So he was a big part of her routine. All of this is now being disrupted. So that was kind of how my whole journey began. So I went from having, no cares to now be having to take care of not one, but two parents. And then my mom, she was not able to participate with his care because she, first of all, had her own situations going on. She ended up having congestive heart failure. She had a heart attack. She had renal problems. She had mobility problems. She started to decline pretty rapidly. And then she was very depressed over what was going on with him. And so she couldn't hear. And that was the biggest thing. You couldn't explain to her a lot of what was really going on. She didn't understand it because she lost like 95% of her hearing. So the telephone was out of the question. So I used to write letters, and I used to see her. We used to email, so she was able to do that. So we could communicate in words that way, so she could understand what was going on. So she wasn't a help in the situation as far as that. So we had him into a hospital. What was it called? Geriatric behavioral management or something. So he ended up going into a hospital for evaluation for 5 weeks. And then he was released to a nursing home with Alzheimer's diagnosis. He had mixed dementia, Alzheimer's, frontotemporal vascular disease. He was like literally in his home one night and removed, and then never went home again. And it was really hard. It was really sad. I ended up because I was the person that signed on as his healthcare proxy, power of attorney, all that. It all fell into my hands to, take care of him and his issues and his needs. And then I also had her. And I also lived 250 miles away and had a job and had a daughter and had all of that going on. So it was a really hectic time.
So how did you prioritize your well-being? Because I know that, and my journey is very different. It was more mental health issues. And right now I'm starting to see decline in my mom, but she's still very independent. And that's why I wanted to start this podcast and start helping people, because I see what is coming for me. And I want to educate myself, and I want to educate everybody out there. For you, how do you prioritize your well-being? Because I'm a chemical engineer, and I've been taking these all of my life. I've been taking courses in which emergency situations in which you have to prioritize. First responders are always taught how to prioritize themselves. And I believe that is true for caregivers as well. Because if you don't prioritize your care, then you end up burning out and hating everybody and then feeling guilty. And it's just a snowfall from that. During this time of a lot of care for your stepdad and your mom, how did you manage that?
Well, in nursing, you learn to prioritize needs. I had that in my pocket, which was very helpful. The distance was helpful because I wasn't in the situation all the time or every day. I didn't have as much as I wanted to be able to see them every day and make sure they were okay. I couldn't do that because I had a life and I had to go to work and take care of my daughter and my husband and all that. So I wasn't able to be at their beck and call. And so that ended up being a good thing because I'm the type that I would have gone every day after work if it was a short ride and check on them, and then have that, worry all the time and feeling guilty if I didn't go. The distance was helpful in that. And I wasn't involved in other aspects of my life when I wasn't with them. So I would visit them once a month. But I also was connected to them via other people who would keep me apprised of what was happening. whether it was my mom's niece who moved in with my mother when he left to take care of her. The plan was that they were going to be roommates, but that didn't last long. We would text and she would keep me updated pretty routinely every day what was happening with my mother and if everything was okay and what did they need. And I was managing, all of that. If my mother needed anything in particular, arrange for deliveries and stuff to the house and managing it's managing somebody else's life, their finances, their medical, all of that, their support network. I was responsible for all of that. She was more responsible for what was happening on a day-to-day basis in the house and going shopping and making sure my mother was safe and ate and all that business. That was very disruptive, as anybody would know, because you can get texts or calls anytime to alert you to a situation. And here I am, I'm far away, I can't act on it. But I had other people there, so I relied on them and they were, my brothers, they were nearby and they were involved as much as they could be. It's hard when you're the designated person though, because the law doesn't allow these other people to intervene or to handle anything. So that's something that people have to think about very carefully when they sign that paperwork, because, as good-hearted or as willing as others may be to take on some tasks for you, in many situations, they are not legally able to do that. So you have to be the one to make the phone calls and you have to be the one to sign the paper. You can't delegate that to anybody else. So that's really hard because it's more work on you. So I utilized them. They had friends and people kept in touch with me. And that was really a big part of it, knowing that I had other people there. I had a very good friend of mine when my mom, after she had been in that car accident, she went to sleep, I think, it was the next day. And nobody was answering the phone. So remember, she couldn't hear. So she didn't hear the phone. And she didn't like to make any adjustments for her hearing. Like she had hearing aids, but she didn't like them. She's very stubborn, did not want to do anything else to make her life better. With her hearing impairment, she preferred to pretend she didn't have it. He just would ignore the phone. So nobody was answering the phone for hours and hours and hours and was concerned. So I had a friend who lived near them and I called her. I said, if you're not doing anything, can you ride over there and see what's happening? So she did. So I knew that I needed to ask for help. And I know caregivers tend to want to do everything on their own and be totally in control. You can't be in control because there's so many variables that sometimes you just need somebody else. So I utilized the people that I had that were actually there to help me figure out what was going on and keep things safe. And then, when I was away from there, as much as I was, I could, I went to my job, I had my friends, I had my family here, I would go to the gym, I read, I wrote, I had my All's Authors because I had started All's Authors in 2015. And now we were talking, this is 2016, 17, it was like a year or so after that, we were building that. So that kept me really busy, gave me an outlet. It was a creative outlet, it was a social outlet. So I had that going for me as well. But it was hard, doing that back and forth drive. It was a 4 or 5 hour drive. And then I used to have to go like every other week, and then it was every week. And sometimes I would go and stay for a week and then turn around, come home. And then a few days later, I have to run around, go back because something was happening. So it was really a lot happened in a very short time. They were on hospice. But I would say, as far as self-care, I tried to stick to my routine. I tried to make sure that the things that were important to me stayed important. And sometimes it's really hard. And I think it's really hard for women in general, especially women with children, to, not put everybody else first till, finally at the end of the day, when you're exhausted, it's 11:30 p.m., you finally have a moment for yourself and you get to indulge it however you want, whatever you do. And then you're just too exhausted to do it. So you don't. And then you start losing yourself. And it's important for you to show as an example to your children and to others that you are important too. You don't just exist to take care of other people, and other people are going to have to find their own way for a while you do whatever it is that you need to do. So being a writer, I had to have my writing time. I went to book events. I was in a book group, writers group, so I did things like that. And so, then that was my time, and my husband and my daughter had to figure out what they were going to do. And that was healthy for them because then it built up their relationship, because you don't always have to be present every minute. Sometimes if you have a partner, a parent, a co-parent for your children, then let them have their time and work on their relationship outside of you. And the same thing, like with my mom, like I knew that she was very close to her niece, and I wasn't like envious of that, of their relationship. It had began before I was born. So, the two of them, they were together, and she had her life there. And I knew she had a very full life. She had a lot of friends. There were a lot of people, and they tried to be as active as they could. So I didn't feel like I had to be there every minute and be involved every minute. And that's really important, because that's how caregivers lose themselves, when they feel that, the whole world is going to come apart if they're not there, if they're not doing that.
I learned that the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
And because my mom, after my dad passed, she went into a very bad depression. And I was still living with my parents. Everything felt into my responsibility, all of it. I was 20, and just having like all these responsibilities that like your parents have been taking care for like all of
Mm-hmm.
your life, and all of a sudden you're responsible for like all of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very shocking for me. And I know it is very shocking because it's just putting more responsibilities, and I don't think we pay attention to all the work that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, I've been working with a coach about like how we as women have been socialized to care for everybody and make sure that everybody's okay. Like you see it during Thanksgiving or Christmas or any other holiday,
Mm-hmm.
you have these dinners and men are sitting enjoying their drinks that women are preparing and bringing those drinks over. So even those tiny things, I think we need to make very conscious efforts that first of all we need to prioritize ourselves. And I love that you say like we leave ourselves to the end, and I think we need to put ourselves at the beginning. Our self-care practices should happen first thing in the morning, whatever it is, going for a walk or reading or journaling, whatever it is, but putting that first thing in the morning. Because once it is done, whatever happens during the rest of the day, you have that completed. And I really like that you bring that up, like prioritize. And another thing that I really enjoyed about this conversation is about don't try to control absolutely everything. And that's another thing that I had to learn the bad way. I moved here to Texas, and even though my mom was very independent, but still like she would call me to the daughter that was living the farthest away. She would call me and ask me how my television is not working. It's like I can't figure that out. I'm not there. Um, can you call
Exactly.
one of my brothers who live like 10 minutes away from you and can just go and help you out?
Yeah, well, there's
So,
that thing again with the women having be the ones to do everything and take care, because it didn't occur to her to interrupt their lives.
so that was something that I started educating my mom. Like, I can't help with these things. You need to call other people for these sort of things. And you have 4 children.
Mm-hmm.
Your 2 daughters live in different cities than you. So make your sons do something for you. I think it is a very good takeaway for everybody. Like, and whatever your journey, start delegating those activities that you can delegate, making sure that everybody's part of the process. I started working with a client recently, and she's very upset that she's appointed the all the legal stuff. She's responsible for that because she's the lawyer in the family. For the rest of the process, she was telling me I'm feeling like left behind, like I'm not part of the process. So I think that is also very important to start delegating into
Mm-hmm.
others, because that brings community and brings sense of
Mm-hmm.
belonging to others. So thank you so much for sharing your journey. It's
Mm-hmm.
a lovely journey.
And sharing some of the responsibilities with others, it does keep them connected, and they need to be. You don't really want to take that away from others if they want to help. What strengths do they bring to the situation? What knowledge do they have? What skills do they have? There's so many things that need to be done that you could easily say, I need you to, manage. We used to buy things, my mother's things, through Amazon. Somebody else can be the one to order the Depends and whatever else that you need from Amazon for the care. Somebody else can do research. Maybe, they can't call. Like, I don't know, like some of the things I spent a lot of time with was with managing the telephone service and the cable. So they may be able to get the information that you need for that so that you can make it easier. They can go to visit care homes and care facilities and report back on what they found, what they learn, what they think of the place, so that you don't have to go. Like, I went to every care facility in like a reasonable distance from their home. I think I went to like 14 places looking for a place for him. That was so time consuming, driving, and I had already driven very far to get there. So I'm driving around, doing all of this. I could have sent my brothers. I could have told my brother, go here and tell me what you find. Get the information for me and let me know what you think about it. How do you feel? Is this a good place? You get a good vibe? They perfectly capable of giving me that information. But, I wanted to do all of that part of it. And then, it's important for other people to do their part, whatever it is that they can. And then in families, everybody has a role, and in caregiving situations that like tends to continue. There's always like the sibling that, needs help. It still depends on the parent, even though they're an adult. And there's always somebody who is off doing their own thing and doesn't really participate with the family. They're going to be like that. I mean, things aren't going to change, and people aren't going to change their stripes because now there's a crisis. So you always got to keep that in mind too. And sometimes the best people, they're not even relatives. It might not be
Yeah.
a relative. It could be a friend, a family friend, somebody that has been there for decades, long before you might have even been born, that is willing to step forward. Or it could just be somebody from church. I always say, people who are older people that are retired, they need things to do and they're willing to help. So if somebody says, what can I do to help? You can give them a job. Even if it's just like, what, can you come over and sit with my mother for an hour and maybe watch TV or talk, play cards, take her for a snack, go out for ice cream, take her for a walk, go by the pharmacy and pick up her medication, stop at the store, get us some milk and bread and eggs, whatever you need, we'll be willing to do that.
Yeah, there's always someone that is willing to help. So if people would like to connect with you, what would be the best way to do that?
I have a website. It's maryanneshuko.com. And you can learn about my books there, because I've written books, and I wrote a love story called Blue Hydrangeas, an Alzheimer's love story about a couple with Alzheimer's. And I am on all the social medias, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, Twitter, LinkedIn, and then at allsauthors.com. You could email me at maryanne@allsauthors.com. And you can find more resources for your dementia caregiving journey at All's Authors. So I encourage you to visit the website, and you can listen to our podcast, Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia, which is also on the Whole Care Network.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marianne. I'll be sure to all your contact information in the show notes so people can reach out, go to the show notes, follow Marianne. She's an amazing human being.
Thank you so much.
I've known you for a year, and every time that I have contacted you, which is not often, but the 3 times I've been in contact with you, you've been a source of resources and help, and you've opened your heart to me without asking any questions. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for coming over. Follow her, learn from her. She's got so much information, and All's Authors is an amazing way and an amazing place to find lots of resources, from cooking activities to like whatever you can think of. Go ahead and follow her. And if you like this show, please review it. That would really help other people like you find us. And hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you so much.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.